Welcome, everyone. I'm Helen Milner. I'm the Group Chief Exec at Good Things Foundation. And welcome to episode 7 of Digital Futures for Good. So this is our conversation series for 2024, where we're talking to a number of different people about their views of how we can fix the digital divide and why that is so essential for us to do. We particularly were facing into the general election. I think we were expecting it to be in August, in the autumn. I think the July election took us all by surprise, but we always wanted to have an election special where we got voices from the communities, from the network, to actually help us to understand why digital inclusion is so important. Previous episodes you might have seen already featured Martha Lane Fox, Andy Burnham, we had Emma Reevey, who's the Chief Exec of Trussell Trust, and Dido Harding and Anna Healy, who were part of the House of Lords Committee for Communications and Digital, who did a really great inquiry into digital exclusion and had published a great report last year that I think is still informing and hopefully will inform the next government. So I've got two brilliant guests with me today. So Liz Williams and Venus Ali. So why don't you introduce yourselves? So Liz, should we start with you?
Thanks, Helen. And happy lunchtime, everybody. I wasn't sure it was morning or afternoon. Happy lunchtime, and what a great way to be spending lunch. As Helen says, I'm Liz Williams. I have the very great pleasure of chairing Good Things Foundation. If somebody was to say to me, what's been the golden thread of your career? And I'd say it's absolutely been about the importance of helping everybody realize the benefits of digital technology as we transform as a world, really, but particularly in the UK. In my day job, I lead an organisation called Future.now. We're a business-led charity, if you can put those two pieces together, but it's all about how do we really equip people in the workforce with the digital skills that they need. And, it's about how do we make sure that pipeline of talent is coming through so everybody has got those digital skills that they need to thrive. And I suppose the other thing I just mentioned is I used to be a social mobility commissioner for the government, and I absolutely believe that digital is the unlocker to so many of the social issues that we have in our country today, that we need to really ensure that if we're leveling up, we're leveling up with digital, because that is absolutely what's needed. And I do recognize that leveling up is very much old language as we're thinking about new governments. So excited about the future there. So thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Liz. And Venus, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Helen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I was actually with the Good Things team in Sheffield just yesterday, so that it feels really nice to be able to sort of continue the conversation with you both today here. So my name is Venus Ali, and I wear a number of hats, all of which are sort of relevant to digital, etc. So in my day job, I am a director at Public First, looking after all things tech. Public First, we are a opinion research and economic and data analysis led consultancy. And so clearly during the general election, we've spent a lot of time traveling up and down the country, both physically and digitally, speaking to folks about, what they make of the party's offers, what they make of the leaders, etc., whether that's through focus group work or opinion research. I am also involved politically with the Liberal Democrat campaign, and so have been participating in all sorts of political panels over the last few weeks. And we'll be travelling up to perhaps not a very sunny Scotland to do some campaigning tomorrow and across the weekend. And so I'll bring some of that sort of political insight to the conversation as well. And then finally, it is a great honour of mine to be part of the Board of Trustees for Good Things Foundation. And that really came from the fact that I've worked in tech now for a little while, and just see how important it is that, as we're seeing all these innovations come online, whether that be AI, super fast broadband, etc., that is available to everyone, and everyone can use that to improve not just their own lives, but that of their family, their communities, and then of course the economy as a whole.
Fantastic. Really great to have you both with us today. So we're going to go to our first clip to hear from some of the digital inclusion hubs who form part of the National Digital Inclusion Network UK-wide. So one of the team's going to play the video. It's not playing for me. If you think it's playing, I've just got a screen.
No, it's not playing for us either.
Okay. We will get there. It's episode 6. We will get there. Wonderful technology. I remember, so back in the 80s, I used to work with the internet in schools, and we used to try and dial up with a modem and an acoustic coupler in schools. So that was always slightly nail-biting because, of course, the speeds were incredibly slow back then. But we knew it was a revolution coming down the track. I know the team will be swan-like at the moment, scrabbling around trying to make sure that they can get this to work. So Venus, have you been on doorsteps? Have you been doing canvassing?
Yeah, I spent an evening this week knocking on doors in Carshalton and Wallington, which is, I mean, the big thing is that some of you will have seen these mega polls called MRPs being published that show some quite strange numbers in terms of what the composition of the next parliament might look like. Super majorities for the Labour parties, some showing the Conservatives down to a really sort of like rump-like state, and then the Liberal Democrats, some, you know, the most recent MRP showing us on 92. I think that all speaks to the fact that so many of these seats are within, you know, very, very small margins. And so, you know, we will wait to see. The only poll that matters is the one on the 4th of July. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, wherever you live, despite the sort of electoral system we have, I'd encourage everyone to go out and use their votes and you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The important thing is to vote, right?
100%.
So Venus, I mean, obviously, well, let's not. I'll talk about the polls and then I'll move on to something else. Obviously, some of the polls have Lib Dems in second place. Okay, let's see if this video works.
The access is the first part of the barrier. Wales are digitally unequipped, I think, in terms of fibre to the premises and rural areas not being connected to the internet, refugees and asylum seekers not having access to the internet. So the first barrier is that access. How do we get more people to get access to the internet to then be part of them services and feel included in services? And then once you overcome access, and we're nowhere near overcoming access at all, then you've got that data poverty. So there'll be people who can't afford full fast fibre, or they don't know what social tariffs. They're paying an extortionate amount of money for a service that isn't for them, or isn't. It might be not adequate for them.
Main barriers is connectivity. So access to the internet, so through data, through Wi-Fi connections, that's a big deal. And also a suitable device. So it might be somebody has a device, but it's not very well, maybe it's broken. And there are people who don't have a device at all. So they'll come in to use our computers, they come in to use our Wi-Fi. And then we also have people that just don't know how to do it because they've never had to do it before. So for example, you might get refugees and asylum seekers that have just arrived in the UK. And they've previously been quite happy with a smartphone, but actually if you put them in front of a laptop or a computer, it's quite foreign to them, really. They don't really know what they're doing. So there's that aspect. And then we've got sort of older people that maybe have just sort of missed out on that generation where you learnt IT, computer skills at school, and it's not something that they've engaged with before. But because of how things are changing now, they're wanting to become involved and to have access to Wi-Fi, the appropriate technology and the skills is essential for those sorts of people.
The emergence of AI is going to be a barrier for some people because they're not going to know how to use it or want to use it. Then there's going to be, can AI take my job? Then there's going to be organizations go, well, we could use AI to reduce our overheads, to have a virtual assistant where you talk to a robot and then you get put through to a human being later on down the line. It's a cost-saving exercise for the organization, but for the human part of it, the person that needs that service, it's a barrier because that robot isn't going to understand them, maybe, if they speak a different language, or if English isn't their first language. If they're Welsh, because sometimes the systems don't understand someone with a Welsh accent.
Great. So we were hearing there from Geraint from Swansea MAD, M-A-D, which is a mental health charity, and Hayley from Learn for Life, which is a all-purpose digital inclusion hub, but really specialises in migrants and asylum seekers. But obviously you heard Hayley talk about older people as well. So one of the things that we do know, because Venus, you helped us with some public polling, is that 92% of the public think that most essential services require people to be online. So 92%, which is extraordinary, but also that 21% of people feel that technology is leaving them behind. Obviously, I think we're all in violent agreement here that digital inclusion is vital. Why do you think it's so important to fix the digital divide?
So I'm happy to kick us off. I think one of the reasons is, and particularly if we sort of view this through the lens of an incoming government, I mean, Labour have made the case to the British public on the basis of we will be prudent with the economy, and they've taken a very sort of like fiscally restrained sort of approach to their manifesto, to the commitments they're making, etc. But at the same time, they recognise that sort of public services are on their knees and that there will need to be investment. So what you'll see with an incoming government is actually them trying to do more with less. And that will feed through right down from sort of the central services to the money that is allocated to local authorities, combined authorities, etc. And so I think, what we'll see a lot of is more things being done with digital because it is cheaper fundamentally, and people will be thinking about that as sort of a crucial metric that they will be measured against. And so if public services are moving towards being more online, etc., and there is that less ability to sort of speak to someone in person. Frankly, if people aren't able to access those services online, we will see sort of a widening in inequality. And this comes back to the point that Liz made right at the start. The inability to access digital really does affect your life chances, your ability to access key services, whether that be sort of mental health services more broadly, education, or support on a number of fronts. And so I think, if we particularly look at this through the lens of an incoming government that is going to be sort of financially prudent, fixing the issue of digital exclusion is only going to become more and more important as we see more public services move online and online first.
Yeah. And Liz, so Geraint and Hayley listed a few different potential barriers. Did any of them surprise you?
No, no, they didn't, because, actually access is a very real issue. And, if you think back to what we learned through COVID as people move more online, if you take that as a moment in time, what that really brought to the fore was the assumptions that were out there about what everybody's experience looked like. So there was an assumption that everybody was able to pivot to get maybe an online shopping slot if there was one available, but they had the ability to do it. There wasn't an understanding that some people didn't have Wi-Fi at home or didn't have the technology or the skills to be able to do that, or that the places that they currently went to get access, like Hayley was saying, people come to us to use our Wi-Fi, that they were being switched off. So that didn't surprise me what they were saying at all. I think the point about things like social tariffs and the people that are that need access to those tariffs not knowing about them, that disappoints me. It doesn't surprise me, but it really feels to me like if we're going to put social support structures around these things, we have to make sure that we're communicating to them, to the people that are hardest to reach and we're targeting them at. And therefore that needs you to think differently. And that's not about sending out an email, which, you know, going to Venus's point about if you're, you know, so much stuff, people's default position is we deal with it through a digital means, even training, you know. So actually being where people are as opposed to where you would like to believe they are is really important. I think the other side to that I absolutely agree with Venus about the current economic climate means that both the government and industry, and you know, Grant's point about AI was quite interesting about, you know, what that's going to mean for jobs. But there's no question that people are going to want to do more with less. But actually, that doesn't mean you have to do things. That doesn't mean worse. You know, in my corporate life, actually, I've watched really inefficient processes that are you can streamline, and suddenly that can be a much better solution. My belief is if we invested properly in a fully digitally enabled, building a fully digitally enabled society in the UK, there is a whole shed load of cost that would take out of the system, because you would be able to deploy things like, you know, if you want to cut the NHS waiting lists, then people being able to access the solutions that you're putting around them easily, that's how you do it. You give them the digital capability and tools to do it.
Fantastic. I'm keen that we do keep hearing from the hub. So let's go to our second video where we'll hear a bit more from Geraint and from Hayley.
Well, lots of Swansea are rural areas. We've got quite a spread of in terms of where people live. Obviously, the further north you go, and in the more rural communities, they're not even on Wi-Fi yet. They're still on dial-up, some of them, communities. And I don't think there's an appetite to get them people connected to the internet and full fast fiber, or even just better internet infrastructure, because the cost is going to be too high for the companies who've got that obligation to make it happen. So they'll just go, oh, don't worry about it. They'll be the 10% that we don't get round to, which isn't good enough, really. But it's still a huge problem because of where they live. The other problem is that we've got a society where there's a monopoly on infrastructure, whether that's phone lines or smart energy meters. There's a monopoly on them, on whose job it is to connect people together. If there was more of a competition, and there was kind of a drive to get more people connected because there was a competition of who can do that work, everything's rented off Openreach as an infrastructure. So if they decide they're not going to target rural areas, there's nothing anybody else can do about it. You can't complain about Openreach, OPT. They haven't got a complaints procedure, really. You can't go to Ofcom or anything like that because they don't regulate it properly. So if you're living in the middle of nowhere and your job relies on you to have internet connectivity, who do you complain to? Get the infrastructure upgrades first, because they're cities and they're seen as where things need to happen. And then the further out from the city you go, the less priority that is. That's the direction. If we want an equitable society, someone at some point is have to go, let's have a look at the rural areas or the suburban areas, and have a look at how they're getting online.
There's a fear. There's the fear of the unknown. There's the fear of looking stupid if they get it wrong. There's the fear of, I'm going to touch it, I'm going to break it. There's a fear of getting scammed as well. So there's quite a lot of barriers to actually overcome before you actually get to the computer or the laptop or the tablet. You've got to try to alleviate those fears and make people feel comfortable with doing that. But it is challenging. And there are some people that will come along to digital sessions and they'll sit back and they'll watch you maybe helping somebody else for a bit. And then maybe in a few weeks' time, they'll sort of have a go once they've realised it's all right and you're okay. But yeah, it has its challenges. Nowadays, I think when people watch the news and things like that, there's a lot on the news about AI. There's programs about, are you talking to somebody real? Are you talking to a computer? And those sort of things are a bit scary. And, you know, that's scary for people who've been digitally included for quite a while, you know. So if you're digitally excluded and you're just sort of coming forward into it, it is a bit scary. So confidence is an issue. Also, the fact, you know, swiping something. If you say to somebody, you need to swipe the screen, what does that mean? Because we're doing that quite a lot, but other people won't know what that means. And also, if you tap something, tap, what does tap mean? You know, this is sort of the physical aspect of getting familiar with the technology.
That's so helpful, isn't it? I mean, obviously I go out and speak to digital inclusion hubs frequently, but it's so easy. If it's easy for me to forget what it's like for other people, then imagine like these decision makers that we're expecting a lot from, particularly in the next government. So Geraint was very much talking around that connectivity issue, that access issue. I mean, I'm in the city of Sheffield, and in my street I've got a choice between O2, Openreach, and other people who rent off Openreach, but Virgin Media and Community Fibre as well. But obviously in parts of Wales that Geraint is supporting, he's got people who still have dial-up, he said. So Venus, on that access piece and about the challenges that he was saying that his community members face, do you think there's enough being done about that? I mean, my answer is always that this is something that where there's investment. What do you think about what he was saying?
Yeah, and I think this is where, you know, it is really important that we do have those like public-private partnerships, because you're right, you know, the large corporates will go with, you know, where there is demand and where there is sort of, you know, the greatest clamour for full fibre, etc., and where they can get their money back, of course. And that's where you need, you know, the public sector to come in and fill those gaps. And in order to understand where those gaps are, it's actually really important that government engages with the likes of Good Things, with the really hyper-local institutions that understand, you know, what it means for someone to not have access and what knock-on effects that has in terms of, you know, their job prospects, with so many jobs being available hybrid. If you don't have good access, we've all experienced the sort of moment where your Wi-Fi is dropping in and out. But if you don't even have that access as a baseline, you are suddenly locked out of a whole lot of opportunities that otherwise would be available to you. So I think, you know, there is a lot that can be done solely by the private sector. And there is a lot that can be done in the voluntary sector. And you know, we see the voluntary sector do more and more, really. But some things do fall to government. And I think, you know, that's why the Good Things Foundation manifesto is really strong here. It's not about, you know, one person or one sector solving it all for everyone, but it really is about sort of strengthening those partnerships and making sure that, you know, everyone plays their part in driving towards sort of, you know, that final objective, which is obviously eradicating digital exclusion in whatever form that takes.
Yeah. Since this is an election special, and thinking back to the 2019 election, quite often people ask me about Jeremy Corbyn's pledge for everyone to have free Wi-Fi, and so which I think is interesting, because I think at the time everybody thought, oh, that's a hilariously stupid thing to say, but it comes up time and time again. Liz, what do you think about giving everyone free Wi-Fi? Oh, are you on mute? Oh, we're having technical problems. Gonna say something? No. So Chloe in the chat panel, thank you, Chloe, has pointed out the minimum digital living standard and that research and that report that we did with the Liverpool University, which was fantastic. So it's absolutely about it being an essential rather than nice to have. Are you with us, Liz? No. Yeah, log off and turn it on and off again. So Venus, do you want to give your answer to that question? Or obviously, since I've rehearsed it many times, I could give you my answer.
No, I'd love to hear from you, Helen.
Well, I think at the heart, it's the right sentiment. So I think at the heart of what was behind that suggested policy is that everyone should have access. Everyone should have a decent quality and affordable access to the internet. And what we do know is that there's around 2 million households who can't afford it. So actually, if there's 2 million households who can't afford it, even at a social tariff level, then clearly we're not creating the right policies, and we're not creating the right partnerships, to take your point, Venus, to make sure that those people who can't afford it, or I think Geraint's point about, how long do they have to wait in those rural areas? Because we don't want them all to move to the big cities, do we? We want to have people across our whole country. So actually, how long do they have to wait for it to get there? I think what Jeremy Corbyn and his team were picking on was the fact that the internet is essential. And I think that's why so many people ask me about it when I'm on panels. Right, Liz, can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you?
Yes. Hooray.
Hey.
So, turn it on and off again.
Absolutely. But do you know what? That's exactly the point that Venus was making. If you haven't got stable connectivity, you can't participate. And if you can't participate, how difficult life starts to become. It's like really evident of that. So I think that there is an argument for the minimum digital living standards, as we were just kind of talking about, and recognizing that perhaps there is a thing that says everybody needs some form of ubiquitous Wi-Fi, but then you can build up from it. So I think there's something there. But actually, on the rural point, I don't think this is just a digital question. I think this is about strategy, and digital, because it is so much a part of how we function now. It's about saying, actually, if I live in a rural community, what do I need there? Which won't just be the digital pieces. It's also about, how do I access jobs? How do I access transportation? All of those things, education, they're all part of it. Digital should be part of that. And it's about us setting strategic intent. And maybe that's something we'll pick up when we talk about, future governments and some of the things that we'd like to see from them.
Yeah, brilliant. And also, thank you so much, everyone who's putting comments and questions in the chat panel. It's exactly what we want to see. Digital Futures for Good, both what we hear on the videos and from Liz and Venus, are going to be part of a end of year report, but so might your comments be as well. So your comments and questions, we're going to feed all of that into that, the collation of that report at the end of the year. So that's fantastic. Let's come back to some of those, and let's come back to what Hayley was saying, but let's look at our final montage from the hubs and then get into the meat of today's conversation, which is really about what we would like to see from a future government.
If the government doesn't fund and invest in community groups like us or in digital inclusion, we can't help those people. They'll be left behind. Some of the people that we support each day, they wouldn't be able to engage or function. They might not even leave the house. So it's really important to get them back into society and get them on the same level as everyone else, as it should be.
It's all very well and good, the government, any government, doing cost-saving activities, reducing that person-centred. It's admin, really, but if you're in poverty or if you're in need to speak to someone, you should be able to speak to someone. You shouldn't have to go through an automated call center that doesn't understand your situation, that hasn't got that empathetic voice or listen or communication to change that situation. What's going to happen, or what seems to be happening rapidly, is that we've gone to a full universal credit rollout, so all of the old benefits are going to be universal credit. Hand holding to migrate for the human being isn't there. It's all digitized, but the person isn't encouraged to be digitally aware or digitally ready. Everything's been done to people, not with people, and then you won't get buy-in.
The government is trying with digital. We are, things are progressing, digital is happening. But I don't think it's on their agenda, because at the moment things are going quite quickly, that it's a case of them catching up with things that are happening rather than taking into account what's going on at the bottom level. Because really, if the government was taking into account digital inclusion completely and helping people get their skills, there wouldn't be places like Learn for Life. There wouldn't be places like Good Things Foundation. We wouldn't need to exist if it was a priority on the agenda, because it would have been dealt with by now. And obviously it hasn't been. So yeah, it needs more work.
Well, this is another problem, is that the general election isn't going to impact Wales as much as it's going to impact England. because we've got to devolve government for lots of things. We've got to devolve services, even to the point where internet connectivity is siloed to one major company really to deliver that. Our water, everybody's on the same company for water, so they can choose what they want to do. I don't think a general election is going to challenge that or change it. What needs to happen from a Welsh Government point of view is that instead of stripping assets out of the communities and saying we're not going to spend money there, we're not going to spend money on services, a lot of services would be a lot easier to access if the infrastructure was in place. So if Welsh Government talked to UK government, so somewhere along the line, they need to have a conversation and go, use some money, go and lobby the companies that provide the infrastructure, make them provide the infrastructure to all parts of Wales, not just the urban areas where there's only 6 cities in Wales. It's not equitable. The Welsh Government would argue they do because they're talking about the minimum digital living standard, and they've surveyed loads of families and blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's with enough haste that it'll make a difference. And it'll be the same organisations talking about the same things who haven't got the ability to change the infrastructure. It's the wrong people. The government should be lobbying the open reaches of the world and going, what are you doing about rural areas getting connected to the internet? Not talking in their silos of going to an organisation like, I don't know, Good Things Foundation or Compass or anything like that. They haven't got the means to change the infrastructure. It's the wrong conversations with the wrong people. It's the right conversations, but the wrong people. I can't go lay in a load of fibre optic cables everywhere. I can talk about it. It sounds brilliant when we talk about it. What's the change?
Needs to look a bit more at sort of like the green side of things as well. So looking at recycling equipment, maybe getting bigger organisations that are using things that are replacing them all the time to donate those devices to places like the Device Bank. Also to get companies that are sort of making money out of digital and doing things like that to sort of give back a little bit to try and help people become part of the digital world. Because it's all very well sort of saying, oh, we're moving things online today, you know, you've got to fill that form in online. But if there's nobody there to help somebody to do that, it's really, really difficult. And eventually they're going to lose a bit of business by not supporting that. So if the future government can sort of help people to feel more empowered by talking to businesses, other sort of bigger organisations, even government bodies and things like that, just to sort of look at what they can do to support maybe the grassroots organisations that are giving the digital support to the people that need to access their services. So the Electricity Board could maybe donate a bit of money so that a digital hub can keep going to support people to be able to access their bills online, pay online. You know, it's just sort of form that relationship. Society does need to sort of join up with digital inclusion, because I was also thinking that, for example, free Wi-Fi would be amazing. If there was like free Wi-Fi in different places across the country, that would include a hell of a lot more people, and that would make a real difference to people's day-to-day lives. And I think if the people who are sort of tearing ahead with things like AI, different platforms, different technology maybe in workplaces, you know, they're replacing people with computers and things, if they can then sort of come round to meet the people who are still digitally excluded at the bottom by supporting them, then it all becomes more, I think it's going to be less scary for people, because they'll realise that they're not being left behind because the people at the top are helping the people at the bottom, and sort of Robin Hood sort of situation maybe. Future government should be investing more into digital inclusion hubs around the country. They need to be there to support people who are supporting the people who are excluded. And so it is an important thing, because it's the same thing really as the food bank. For us, we sort of see digital inclusion as a human right, and it's something that people need to be able to do, need to be included in. Otherwise they're missing out. They're not taking full advantage of what's going on in the world, because the world is moving ahead. Things like online banking, banks are closed, people have to do stuff online. You know, if they haven't got a bank in their town or their village or whatever, the people having to travel a long time if they can't actually do it online. So, you know, essential day-to-day things need to be accessible.
Fantastic. Sometimes I just think that we should just put people like Geraint and Hayley in the right rooms in Westminster and to make sure that they can tell them how it is, right? So let's just focus on what they were saying. So what is it that you think needs to happen? Let's call it a new government. Let's say that we will get a new broom, whatever kind of new broom it is, after next week's election. What do you think they should be doing to help Hayley and Geraint? And clearly they're very focused on not just helping themselves and their own communities, but they're coming with such experience to help people across a number of communities. So Liz, let's come to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I mean, it's really interesting because Hayley talked about funding for hubs, but then she also talked about we shouldn't be needed. And I don't agree with her on we shouldn't be needed, because the technology is going to always be there, always moving on, always advancing. But I suppose for me at the moment, I think a lot of what's happening is we've got sticking plaster activity. So people like Hayley and Geraint are doing amazing jobs trying to kind of keep people supported in a really difficult set of concepts. But there's no strategy. There's no strategy for the sticking plasters. And thankfully, organisations like Good Things in particular are providing strategy and saying these are the things that need to happen. It is about devices, it is about data and connectivity, and it is about skills. And therefore, these are the kind of things you need to do. But so there isn't a strategy for the sticking plasters, but then there isn't a strategy for the country. And what I really think needs to happen is it's that thing about what's the bold vision for where we want to be in the UK when it comes to, not this thing where we go, oh, we want to, have we want to be a tech superpower. It's not about that. It's about what's the digital society. Do we want everybody to be connected, everybody to be access to good education, everybody access, what's the vision? The government can help set that. They have a really important role in defining what that vision is, which is a long-term strategic vision. And then they have a role in convening people around it. So the point about, the energy company, yes, of course, the energy company can do something and they could fund some hubs or they could fund, but actually if they're doing it as part of a bigger plan, it's much more likely to be successful. The work, I think, around things like the minimum digital living standards is really interesting. So Professor Yates, Simeon Yates, who worked with Good Things Foundation on that and others, one of the things that he says that really resonates with me, and this goes back to being where people are, he says, we are building for the digital society we want to be. So when it comes to, for example, somebody that's deciding what that NHS app might look like, they're building it for the society that they want to be part of, or they believe that we're in. They're not building it for where people are today. And I think we need to get much more closely rooted in where people are today to enable us then to build really effective strategies collectively that we then deploy against. If someone said, let's take skills. If somebody said, we want everybody in the country, I want everybody in the country to have at least the skills in the essential digital skills framework, and we need to do that in 3 years, and I want all of these companies to come in and help me do it. Might not get there, but you'd get flipping close to it. It's that galvanizing thing. So that's some of it. But then you need the sticking plaster stuff to be properly resourced, because there's a two-stage two-horse race on this, I suppose. So yeah, that's some of my thoughts. But I had loads of things going around my head because they were both coming up with so many interesting perspectives that were, both very diverse and very different. And you're absolutely right. People like them should be holding power to account and perhaps have much more time on things like the parliamentary agenda. Go and hear from people.
Yeah, absolutely. So during this series so far, Digital Futures for Good, that time and time again, when I've asked my guests, what is it that they think they want? What do we need from the next government to help to end digital exclusion, to fix the digital divide? Leadership comes up time and time again. So Venus, do you think we can expect leadership on digital inclusion from the next government?
I hope so, and I think, I would build on what Liz said. I completely agree with everything that Liz, all the points Liz made. I think government can act as a role model. as well. And I was really heartened by the fact that, Peter Kyle, in his speech during London Tech Week, specifically called out the work that Good Things Foundation is doing and said that a Labour government would be exploring how, to Hayley's point, how government could recycle the technology that, they're using for good, in partnership with Good Things. Government can act as if government can do this, well, why can't a large corporate do this? And so I think, there is a lot to be said by government actually role modeling the behavior that they would like to see from others. And so, that's a very easy thing to do that actually doesn't require huge budgets. And it's really about sort of leadership and culture. And those two things just cannot be underestimated. So I would say that as the first point. I think the second thing as well is actually, we are in this moment of opportunity with where the conversation is with AI today. Hayley's right. There is, of course, a lot of fear and a lot of concern about what AI might mean for people and jobs, etc. But actually, Public First, we recently did some extensive polling on public attitudes and perceptions to AI. And we found actually the emotion that people were most likely to sort of, put forward when asked how they felt about AI was curiosity. And, AI could be much more intuitive than technologies that have, come before it, in that you are meant to engage with it as if it were human. It is meant to be a technology that you can engage with in a really intuitive way, and it could help support the digital, close the digital divide. But that will only happen if people are open to engaging with it, trust it, etc. And so I think we're in this moment of opportunity where really, it could go one of two ways. And so I think another point where I would like to see government leading is not just talking about how the UK can be, a science superpower, as Liz says, but actually going, okay, how can AI support us solve some of these really specific challenges in our communities, in our, in where people are and how they're like living their lives today. And I think if we can crack that, we can actually unlock so many more things and so many more opportunities. So yeah, I would say, of course, money is really important, but actually putting that to one side, leadership, culture, and recognizing the moment we're in is just also incredibly important and could really shift the dial on so many things.
Yeah, fabulous. Sorry, Liz, I saw you put your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I did. There was two things I wanted to say. Just as a personal reflection, I used to work in a large corporate, and that thing about if you have a government with a very clear vision and they put that challenge into business. I've been at the end of those letters where they come through the organization. And the power of that convening power of government, if you've got that leadership and bold vision and you know where you're going to, that is a massive game changer. And that to me is the thing I would really want to see from the next government. But I think there's also something about how we talk about this issue. So we talk about it as an issue. We talk about it as a problem. We talk about it as this. I know you don't always at Good Things Foundation, but the prevailing narrative is it's one that isn't particularly optimistic, because it is pretty bleak and there's a lot to do, and I find it really depressing that it takes an organization like Good Things to do the economic impact assessment and to say, do you know what, if we crack this, we think there's, with help from very clever people, we think it's over 13 billion pound of impact. I think it's much more, by the way. But I think, for the new government coming in, this is not a problem to solve. It really isn't a problem to solve. This is an opportunity for you to realize this is about how we get our economy back on its feet. This is about how we bring people with us. This is about those hollowed out communities that need revitalizing. And somebody said it was one of the Good Things team, because we've just literally had the Good Things board, as Venus was saying, they were relating the AI thing, saying, is this a bit like the coal mine? Is it a coal mine situation where you shut the coal mines and you haven't got a strategy? And that's where my kind of head is on this. I'm hugely excited about the opportunities AI give us. I think they are potentially massive, things like what can do for cancer treatment and all those things, amazing. But I've also got that Goldman Sachs research in my head that goes, this is going to take out 300 million jobs, or significantly change a proportion of those across Europe and America. So for me, we have to solve this problem, because this is about the kind of society we want to live in. And there's no question that society is digitally enabled.
Absolutely. And I think Venus picked up on Peter Kyle's speech at London Tech Week. And I actually think that's what Peter Kyle was saying. So he's the Labour Party Shadow Secretary of State for the Department for Science, Innovation, Technology. And so we can only hope that he doesn't change his mind if he does become the actual real Secretary of State in that department. But he was saying that there's this huge opportunity that digital can bring, in growth, in helping our businesses be more productive, but also for providing opportunities for people who currently don't have opportunities. And he put digital inclusion right at the center of that as well, is to say the opportunities there, and that is for everyone. So we want to have a better, stronger nation. Obviously talked about economic growth, but digital inclusion is a contributing factor to that economic growth. It's not a kind of separate problem over here to be solved. And I actually thought that Geraint and Hayley were talking very much in that way as well, is that they're seeing on the ground that people want to be part of the digital society, want to be part of a digital future, and that actually the support that they're providing and that they would like a government to provide. Let's pick up a couple of things in the chat panel.
While you're just reading that, Helen, but I think Hayley also merely made an important point about fear. And it's about also, so some of that's also about the language and the narrative. If you spend a lot of money at government level putting an advert out, as they have done recently, about your risk of being scammed from banking, then please put part of that, the tools that enable me to then go and protect myself and educate myself and do that. So it's like the left hand and the right hand knowing what they're doing, but also being really clear that people do need to, for some people, they have a long distance to go, and they need people like Hayley and Grant holding their hands through that process. And that's good value for money, by the way, because of the return you get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were talking about connectivity earlier, Chloe Rickard said it would be great to do things like building a free internet connection into new infrastructure. So, for example, new social housing developments, public buildings, and that would send the message that it's a necessity. And then Raj Mack said, a suggestion about rolling in into housing rents and rebate subsidy for social housing, to make sure that there's a policy instrument that enables connectivity costs to be included in rents, and then that could be reclaimed, for example, through a subsidy rebate back up to the government. I think is Raj's point there, which I think is a really good idea. I think it's that point that, just today we've got Hayley and Geraint, and we've got people in the chat panel who are coming up with ideas for how we could innovate. I do wonder, though, if that is still sticking plaster. Back to the point about leadership and convening. I mean, I think at Good Things Foundation, we always think that we should work on both fronts, right? We should do the pragmatic, practical, have I just gone very, I think I'm doing fireworks or something, that do getting the government to give us their old tech so that we can get it back into the hands of digitally excluded people, but also at that national and macro level, think about what those big things are that we want to get from government.
Helen, on that though, it's a really good example of, if you take other contexts, if you look at what's happening with the environment, you have bold vision around where we need to get to. You've got bold targets, very clear, we're the net zero, that then organisations are invited to work around. Now, you can have your views on how successful that particular one is, but as an approach, it absolutely works. It's about set the thing and then bring those that are working on it alongside. So I love that idea about social housing, but that's exactly the example of bring the government departments in and say, what are you going to do to make this happen? What's your role? Or what are the things that you're doing at the moment that might be acting as a disincentive? And suddenly you get it's a whole different conversation. It becomes properly baked in.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one other one I want to pick up. So Greg Klassen has put in the chat panel that he's an NHS digital inclusion coordinator, and it sounds like he's been working incredibly hard in the area of the Midlands and Nottinghamshire, that he's saying they don't have enough digital inclusion hubs, so there's not enough digital support. And I think this is back to what Hayley was saying, I think, about joining up and silos, is that, and then he's saying that the funding is running out, and then we know that if Labour get in, they want to cut down NHS waiting lists, they want to increase the number of people using the NHS app. So actually, how do we put all of these things together to really tackle some of those big societal issues of the time? So Venus, did you want to comment? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is it, government can have these large missions, but things aren't going to change overnight. And so it's like, what are the stepping stones, as Liz says? And I think, the fact that digital hubs are where people go, they are our libraries, our food banks, etc. They can be so many, they are, you can access these things in a really informal setting where you are already, etc. I think that like the Good Things model is so brilliant for that. Hayley was saying, for example, that sometimes, someone might see this and might not engage on that first attempt. It might take them, a few goes, almost like a run up, before sort of diving in. And I think, those sort of hyper local community based services and resources are crucial if we want to sort of, get people on that first stage of their digital journey. And so, I mean, it's great to have missions, and it's great to have sort of these like big goals, but changes are going to happen overnight, and you need to take people on a journey with you. And I think those sort of digital support hubs are really crucial, and it's about can we get them to where people are, and I know Good Things are doing a lot of work on sort of making sure that that's a reality.
But on that, Venus, surely one of the things as well should be it shouldn't be beholden on a local activist to deliver that thing and then to spend. I mean, like, I've spent time with Hayley. I know exactly how hard she works on her fundraising. I know exactly that she sits there going, I'm not sure we can get the electricity on. That to me is the part of this that's really important, that actually we should maybe part of the strategy, the kind of the pathway to it is that we say every community should have access to this type of thing. And we know there are already lots of them out there. And this is how we're going to strengthen and grow them. And, business, by the way, how can you come alongside and make sure that those organizations are really more successful? And I think that kind of, I'm sure Helen's going to come to Claire's question, but, that thing about, do you think people in government really understand the kind of the context?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just going to roll together Claire's question, which is great, which is often about moving between the departments and also for that to be quite siloed. Chloe's made a great point that in Cornwall that they're looking at an impact report across different policy areas, and she's put her email in there if you want to get in touch with her. And then Raj Mack has said that about, again, that digital inclusion is seen as isolation. So again, specifically a thing to be fixed as opposed to be part from other policy areas. Just quickly, Venus, did you want to say something? Could you say something about Labour and their missions? Just to, obviously we don't know they're going to win and we don't know what that really means, but just to kind of shine a bit of positivity on a potential future government and missions.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this goes to the heart of Liz's point, is that, you have to have some sort of organising principles and strategy. And I think, what we witness, and regardless of what you think about the sort of last, since 2019, the last 5 years, is actually the Conservatives had a huge 80-seat majority. They could have done a lot of things, whether that's sort of on full fibre or on a number of other promises that they made. And I think, what we're seeing from the polls today is that Labour are going to be handed a similar, if not even greater, majority, which can mean that they can actually get things done and show that that there is change happening, etc. And they do have these missions around sort of economic prosperity and cutting waiting lists, etc. Now, whilst there's no sort of tech mission, actually digital sort of sits as a horizontal right across this. And I think to, Claire's point of secretaries of state constantly moving across departments, what I hope will come through from that is that, okay, tech is an enabler here and here and here, and therefore it should be dealt in that sort of, this is an enabling thing that can, be applied in all sorts of settings and really does sort of open up and unlock sort of opportunities. So I think, we are starting to see the seeds, or the sort of bright green shoots of like a change of approach and that strategy that Liz was talking about, which I feel very optimistic about. But I think it's accountability. It's, Helen, it's down to you to hold these guys' feet to the fire when they're, in and getting sort of comfortable in their like new ministerial offices. But it's a time for positivity, I think.
Yeah, that's great. So we're running close to the final whistle. A good football analogy there. So both of you, Liz, Venus, if Peter Carr was here, what would you say there's one thing that he should do? I know there's lots of things, and all of the ideas that we've touched on today are so important. What's the one thing? So who wants to go first?
I will, because it's the things I've already said. I want him to set a bold vision. I want him to, which is something locked around a great digital catch up, which she's talking, much and what the societies want. And I want him to invite all the departments in the industry around what that needs to look like. And actually, it shouldn't just be the departments in industry. It should also be those that really understand the ground. So it's the likes of Hayley and Geraint and people like that should also be part of that. But set a bold vision, great digital catch up.
Fantastic. And Venus?
I'd give him a weekend off after sort of, running up and down the country. Nice. But then after that, I put him back on a bus and actually sort of send him out to Swansea and to go and see Hayley and to go and see sort of, the excellent hubs that like Good Things supports like across the country, and actually hear what the issues are, and then, move on to Liz's piece, because that's absolutely like vital.
That's fantastic. And he came to a Digital Inclusion Hub in Croydon and really enjoyed it and asked loads of really great, engaging and incisive questions. So maybe he would quite like the bus idea. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody has seen the Good Things Foundation manifesto to fix the digital divide on our website or on our social media. If not, then please do go and have a look. Thank you so much for all your great comments and questions in the chat panel. And the next episode is Wednesday, the 31st of July, 1 to 2, where we're going to be looking at health. So actually something that has come up today, we're going to be looking at digital health with two great speakers talking about the government, digitization, and how digital inclusion is an opportunity to help us to have a even better, stronger health service in the UK. So thanks everybody for coming, and thanks so much for all your comments and your participation. And thank you to Liz and to Venus, and of course to Hayley and Geraint as well for helping us out.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.